Let me please introduce today's presenter, Julie Marsh. Julie is a third grade teacher who has been teaching in the Redford School District, which is right outside of Detroit, for 29 years. And she's here to tell you how she has used brain-friendly reading strategies in her classroom and the results that she has gotten from that work with her students. So welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Erin. And thanks everybody for coming out this morning. I really appreciate it. I'm going to talk to you about brain-friendly reading in my third grade classroom and how I used it with both my whole group and my differentiated reading groups. And thanks to We Shall Read for sponsoring this awesome literacy series. I'm very honored to be a part of it. So just a little bit of background about me. Like Erin said, I'm a third grade teacher in Redford, Michigan, with 29 years classroom experience. And last summer, so about 1 year ago, I began researching how I could better help my students learn how to read. So coming and working in the pandemic, it was really apparent. I had students at great deficit, and I just needed to know, what to do and how to help them better. So I first joined the Science of Reading Facebook group, What I Should Have Learned in College, and the community. And I started following literacy teachers on Instagram. I started listening to a lot of podcasts. And in doing so, I learned about the science of reading, including the simple view of reading. I put some of the graphics on the slide, the ladder of reading and writing, Scarborough's reading rope, and orthographic mapping. All of these things were new to me just this past summer. And during this time is when I discovered brain-friendly reading on a Facebook thread with the Science of Reading group, What I Should Have Learned in College. And brain-friendly reading posted on a comment or a question, and I started looking into it, and it sounded exactly like what I was looking for, how to help my struggling readers. And so I began the level 1 training just last September, 2021, at the end of September, and I started implementing strategies right away. And so the first thing I did was all whole group. So at the end of September, all of October, I introduced brain-friendly reading, and I started with the 3 parts of the brain and training the brain to be able to read. So I would tell the students that, our brains aren't wired to read. They're really wired to be able to talk. And so we have to build pathways between the different areas of the brain for sounds, letter patterns, and meanings. And we need a lot of pathways so those 3 parts can talk to each other really fast. And I put a little graphic on here that I learned about in my training. And then I would take my hand and I would point to like 3 parts of my brain. And I would say, it's like having roads in between each part of the brain. And like in our neighborhoods, if you want to get somewhere fast on your car or in your car on your bike, what do you need to do? Well, you need to be able to travel down a road. And so that's kind of like what happens in your brain. You need a path. And how do you get a path? How do you get good at something? You practice. And that's the same thing with reading, writing, and spelling. So I kind of started out whole group just talking about the brain. And then right after that, with the whole group, I started doing tapping the chart, which is a very key part of brain-friendly reading. And I would do this during our word power block. So my district has a mandated reading curriculum, and that's between 60 and 90 minutes a day. And so during the word power part, we tap the chart whole group. And tapping the chart activates the sound symbol connection and the 3 parts of the brain in a multisensory way. And it builds those neural pathways to wire and grow the brain for reading and spelling. And the goal would be to overlearn the sounds so we can decode with automaticity. And I would just tell the kids, we're growing our brains, we're training our brains. And these are the 4 of the charts in brain-friendly reading. And the first chart is in the downloads if you download the handout. The first chart is there. And then my district has its own alphabet chart. So I kind of modified the first chart and the vowel chart to match the alphabet chart with my school district. And that's posted over here. And then I would just introduce one chart at a time. And as students became familiar with it, I would put in a new chart and we would just keep practicing. We would reference this chart for reading. We would reference it for spelling. You can tap the whole chart, part of the chart. And I'm going to show you how I did that next. And so this is a picture of the first chart. And the way I started was with call and response. So I'm going to show you how I did that. So this is the first chart, and the kids all had a duotang folder, and it had all the charts in it. So I had like 30 duotang folders. They had all the charts in it. And we started with this first chart. And it started call and response. And so I would say something like, okay, put your finger on the A. And then I would say A, apple, A. And then the students would say and would tap 3 times, A, apple, A. And then I would say B, bat, B. And then the students would respond, B, bat, B. C, cat, K. CI, CE, CY, city. And it was call and response for at least a week or more. And when it seemed like most of the students were getting it and it sounded accurate, we moved from call and response to doing it all together. And so I would say something like this. Okay, put your finger on the A, ready, begin. And then all of us together would say A, apple, A, B, bat, B. And just go through the whole chart. When kids got pretty good at it, I sometimes had student leaders call and respond or call the chart. And you can go, I did everything in order at first, from the beginning all the way down to the end of the chart in order. But eventually when the kids were really good at it, we kind of changed the order around. Went backwards, you can go down and like really mix it up a little bit to really test if they know it. And then we worked our way to, by the end of the year, we were working on the charts without the pictures. And so this is the team's chart with no pictures. And so in my class, we worked up to, I made little packets of all the charts without the pictures. And then the kids who were comfortable, they started using this to tap the chart. And so that was kind of what we worked up toward. At the end of the year. And then another really important part of brain friendly reading is arm spelling. And so whole group, before I even started differentiated reading groups, I showed them arm spelling, and that's a strategy for segmenting and blending in a cross-body multisensory approach. And we started it right away. As soon as we started tapping that first chart, I started playing I Spy or I Hear, and not necessarily in word power, just if I had a minute or two, it doesn't take very long. Like if, we had a minute before lunch or something, I introduced it, and really good for ear training and helping to teach and reinforce the arm spelling and the ear training, the phonological awareness piece that's so important. And I might say something like, I see A, and then I would put my arm out. There's a graphic here where you put the first sound on your shoulder, the second sound on your elbow area, and the third sound on your wrist. And I would just put my arm out. You arm spell with your non-dominant hand. And I would say something like, I see a n, n. And then students could do that. And then if they could figure it out, they would blend it, and then they'd raise their hand and they would say, oh, I see a pen, pen. And then they go down their arm and they blend it. And so we would do that a lot with 1-syllable words, things I saw around the room or just other things that I could think of, just to practice the arm spelling. When kids got pretty good at it, we added the writing piece where they would, put a pencil in their hand, and I'm right-handed, so I'm going to have my pencil in my right hand, and then I arm spell with my non-dominant hand. And so if I'm doing pen, I would go P, and then I would write the letter P on my paper or on my whiteboard. We use whiteboard and markers a lot. Okay, write the E, and then N, and I write the N. And that really helped with students who had trouble holding all that in their memory. So it was really helpful for the working memory to arm spell and write at the same time. And it helped kids write the sound and the corresponding letter in the correct order. So that became a really important part in our class. And when kids were trying to spell words, I would say, put it on your arm, or they would get a tap chart to help them if they needed to. And then eventually we would add in 2-syllable words. So then it's about the end of October, beginning of November. And, I'm maybe 5 lessons into my training, and all of the testing has been done at the beginning of the year. My district uses NWEA Map Reading Fluency, DRA2. And then this year I did the Words Their Way primary spelling inventory. I learned in my training how important spelling is and how spelling and reading are two sides of the same coin, and the spelling is an insight into the reading. So I never realized that before. So I gave the spelling, Words Their Way, spelling inventory. And then my goal for September is to do the phonics screener, which I didn't do this year. I learned about the phonics screener toward the end of the training. So this will be a goal for next year, is to do that as part of my beginning of the year assessments. So once all of the testing was in, with the help of my lead interventionist, we sat down and went through all the data and came up with the reading groups. They were 30 minutes a day. So that's in addition to the whole group reading time. With the district mandated curriculum, the differentiated time was 30 minutes, Monday through Friday. And then 8 students were in a tier 1 book club group where they focused on nonfiction reading and building knowledge. And then 7 students were in a brain-friendly reading group with me. And then 7 students were in a brain-friendly reading group with Paraprofessional. And then 2 students were in what was considered a tier 3 pull-out intervention with the lead interventionist. And all of this happened in my room except for the 2 students pulled out. So I sat in front of the room. I used an easel and a little stool. The kids sat in front of me with whiteboards and markers. The paraprofessional was in the back of the room at a grouping of desks put together. And then the book club group was on the other side of the room. So all of this was going on in the classroom in that 30 minutes. And so what I did was I used the training companion guide that I received during the training, and I just followed the scope and sequence. It's really easy to follow, and all of the lessons, all the games, everything is in the training companion guide along with that scope and sequence. And I used a brain-friendly reading lesson sheet to help me plan and organize my lessons. Each skill was put on its own page, and I used the same page for about 2 days. And then the lessons are taught in an explicit order sequentially with that I do, we do, you do, gradual release model. And then in your downloads, there is a sample lesson plan page like this one. I'm going to show you what that looked like and how I used it. So the lesson plan page is this. And then up top, I would just write, the skill, the date, the page number. And then it kind of told me, the ideas to do and in what order. And then the blank I liked because I would put maybe certain words I wanted to make sure I got to, skills I saw maybe needed review, the game I wanted to play, and it's just looks like that. And then this is one that was filled out. So this is one that I used on March 10th. I would just kind of fill out and make notes. And then you can see right here, this is March 11th. This was my second day. And I would write down, what I wanted to review. I wanted to review, these types of words, and then, what game I was going to play and so on. So I used the lesson plan page, every 2 days. And then I just kept those in a 3-ring binder so that I could, look back on those as well. And then my paraprofessional led a group as well. And so I would take the lesson plan page and also share it with her. Day 1 of a new lesson, this is how I did it. So step 1 would be to tap the short vowels. We tap the short vowels every day in the small group. I do not tap the full chart in the small group because we only have 30 minutes and I do that whole group. But tapping the vowels, the short vowels every day is how we started. And then I always had a review, a brief review, which included sound dictation, where I would dictate a sound, students would use whiteboards. We would arm spell and write previously learned skills. And then I would introduce a new skill and we would tap it, just the new skill. And then I would model how to write the new skill and I would use my easel. So this is a little picture of my old easel that I've had for a really long time. And I would just model, and I sat on a little stool over here and I would binder clip the chart or whatever page I was working on, and the kids sat in front of me and I would model how I wanted the students to write it 9 times, saying the letters and the sounds to help put that into long-term memory. And then I would arm spell with the kids and give them about 5 words to do that orally. And I'm going to show you how I did that. So with the whiteboards and their markers, and then I would model if the lesson page, the one that's modeled in this presentation is the lesson page where it has the second sound of TH and then the WH. And so the first thing we would do is we would tap this. I didn't typically give the lesson plan page out on the first day because there's a lot on the page, especially at the beginning. This is a lot to look at. So we would just use our chart and we would tap it 3 times. So we would say TH, them, TH, them, TH, them. And then if I was doing the second sound on the same day, the WH, I would say WH, whale, walk, WH, whale, walk, WH, whale, walk. We would tap 3 times. And then I would show the students, okay, and I would mark this on my easel. You're going to write it like this, TH, 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 and I would say, I want you to do that like 9 or 10 times. And then they would do that on their whiteboard. And if I had a second that day, not most lessons don't, but on this one, if it was WH whale walk, I would WH walk, WH walk, WH walk. And they would do it 9 or 10 times, you know, trying to get that into the long-term memory. And the repetitions that's something I learned that's really important, is to go through that repeatedly to help get that into long-term memory. And then I would pick maybe 5 words or so from the lesson plan page. The kids don't have this. And I would pick, so if I, wanted to do that, I would say, okay, the word is that. And they would have to say it back, that, and then, okay, put it on your arm, at, and then blend it down their arm. And then we would do something like, okay, what sound do you hear first? What's the first sound you hear? Okay, what's in the middle? At. What do you hear at the end? And so kind of always going back to that, that ear training and that phonological awareness and getting those sounds and those letters in the correct order. So you can kind of see a picture here of a student writing the TH and underlining it multiple times. And, we have our charts out to reference if needed during this time. And then always discussing where they hear the sound. And all that was just done orally when we would end up spelling a word for step 1 and step 2. Step 3 on the lesson plan page would be I modeled, and the student would mark the new skill and read each word, and we would discuss some of the vocabulary. And again, the charts are out for reference if needed. And then I would choose some of those marked words for dictation. And so I'll show you how I did that. So because I didn't want to use the lesson plan page on the first day, because there's just so much on it, especially at the beginning of the year, what I liked to do is I like to use the game page. And this is in the companion guide. All of this is in the program. That's why it was just so easy to follow, because everything is right there for you. All I had to do is make copies. And so what I would tell the students to do, and I would clip this on my easel, so the kids, I would model it first. And I would say, okay, you're going to take your highlighter and you're going to do this, that, and they would have to go through the whole paper, even down here, whisk, which. And then once they're done highlighting the skill, I would say, okay, you're going to read it. They might read it with a partner. I might be reading it with some kids. We would read them whole group, and I would pull in a little vocabulary. I might ask, like, especially for a word like whisk. Has anyone ever used a whisk? Do you know where you would find a whisk? When you talk about it in the kitchen, or if you've ever made eggs, or a time you've used a whisk or seen somebody, or like this word whack, I might say, okay, once they have marked it, whack, I might say, does anyone know a synonym for whack? And what that might mean, and we would talk about what that means. So bringing in some of the vocabulary, that language piece is really important. So I would use the Go Fish page, or sometimes I used a game board just to kind of mix it up. And if I used a game board, it would be the same thing. Mark it, this, whisk, and I would go through the same procedure. The students then would read the words, read them with a partner. We would read them together. I would do some vocabulary work. And this first part was really important, that they mark the words and they read the words together and with me. And then what I would do is I say, okay, now flip your paper over. So they flip it over. And then I would say, now I'm going to give you some words to arm, spell, and write. And so then I would pick words from what they just marked. to arm spell and write. And so I might pick the word, if I picked the word this, it was on the sheet that they just marked, they would have to arm spell it, but then write it on their whiteboard as well. And then what I'm doing is I'm monitoring spelling, I'm giving corrective feedback if it's needed. I might see if I see something there that's an error, I might say, encourage arm spell again, or I might say, what sound do you hear up here? What sound do you hear first? Or what sound do you hear right here, second in the middle, right here on your elbow? Asking them questions if something is not spelled correctly. So I learned something in the training about orthographic mapping, which takes place in the brain, and how it's really important to just map these words, to arm spell them out and to segment them. And that is how we can move those words into long-term memory. We're not memorizing spelling, we're learning skills. That was a big learning. And that's why the chart tapping and the arm spelling is such an important part of brain-friendly reading. And then we ended day one always with a game. So games at the end of the lesson, they're just really fun. I usually try to leave about the last 10 minutes for game playing. And the games are good because they train the brain to recognize the pattern quickly. And it provides that meaningful repetition and a repeated reading of words within the same pattern, which helps form those neural pathways, training the brain and growing the brain to be able to read, write, spell even better. And it's fun and it's low stress because it's a game and they're playing with a partner. And then I just put some of the games that we play. This is the board game that we just highlighted. This is kids playing the Go Fish game, which is played just like you would play Go Fish as a card game. Tic-tac-toe, bingo, there's different kinds of games. And I just put on the slide how important it is for those repetitions. So there's been research done about how maybe your gifted students need only 1 to 4 repetitions. They're in the green zone, you know, but typical students need 4 to 14, and struggling readers might need 14 to 40 repetitions. Students who are dyslexic or learning disabled, they might need 40 to 200 repetitions. They're in the red. And that was really new learning for me. This whole ladder of reading and the amount of repetitions needed was something that I guess I never really thought about it, but it's not really surprising when you think about, you know, students were really struggling. They did not have enough repetitions with the skills. And so after we marked everything and we had everything ready, we'd play a game. And I just kind of wanted to show you how a game might look. And so, for example, the page where the kids did the marking, this is a Go Fish page. And it's you're told what the page is in the corner. This is the second sounded TH for Go Fish. And you need 2 of these to play Go Fish, and you cut them out and make a card deck. Well, cutting out all those cards in 30 minutes for 3rd graders, that was a lot of time. And so what I did is I had all the decks pre-made just to save on time. And what you do is you do it just like you would play Go Fish. I had the kids told about 4 or 5 cards was enough. And some of the kids put them on their whiteboards like you saw in the picture. But you just do it like Go Fish. Like, do you have, and I had them arm spell to slow them down a little bit. Do you have N? And then their partner would have to say, yes, I have then, or no, Go Fish. So, and they would make their matches. Or do you have whack? No, Go Fish, or whatever. And then one thing I wanted to point out, I included the CK SOC lesson in the downloads, because one thing that's really nice with the scope and sequence, it's cumulative. And so the students have already learned this skill that in a 1-syllable word with 1 short vowel, CK says k at the end of the word when it touches the vowel, and they learn that little rhyme and they can say it like really fast. They've practiced it a lot. And so this is just a nice review. So it kind of cycles back and to something that's already learned. So that's how you play the Go Fish. And then a variation of Go Fish is the I have, do you have. So this is nice with going from a closed CVC syllable type to the vowel consonant E. So it would work like this. And I included this in your downloads too, these pages. So I have cat, but then on this skill, we worked on the syllable type vowel consonant E. So the kids have to know what the word is to adding E. So I have cat, do you have cape? And then there's a whole list of these, like I have tap, do you have tape? or I have tape, do you have tap? And that was just a good way to go back and forth between the two different syllable types. And then if we marked a game board, we would play the game instead. And I just use dice or materials from my math kit, and the kids would just roll the dice and they would have a marker and they would do the same thing. They would arm spell, they would read the words, and they would go through the game board playing the game. So that would be the end of day one. So Erin, were there any questions up to this point about how I started the school year whole group and then went into the differentiated groups?
I do see one question. Did the Parapro do the same lesson as you daily?
No. And I'm going to get to that when we talk about the data set. The Paraprofessional was using at the beginning of the school year, when I first started this, was not doing brain-friendly reading because I was just learning it. She was using a district intervention program. But then at the end of January, when we did the winter data, that group was not progressing in the way the brain-friendly reading group was, so we switched it. And so when she started doing the brain-friendly reading, I gave her my lesson plan pages, like the ones I showed you earlier, and she used those until she got really comfortable. And then I would work with her like before school or on a prep period, and I would kind of train her on how to do all of this. The kids don't have a student book. The kids have, if I want them to have the lesson, I copy just the lesson pages and then would give them what they needed for that day, is how I did it. My paraprofessional, I think when she started at the end of January, she put, I think, all the initial lessons in a little duotane folder. I did not do that. She wanted to have the lessons in a little folder to kind of save time and for management. But no, they don't have like a specific book. We just make copies, and everything's in the training companion guide. So it's really easy to follow.
There's a training companion guide, and there's also a lessons book. The training companion guide has all the lessons plus the games. You can find both of those books at brainfriendlyreading.org.
If I just flip through the book, there's a really great scope and sequence. I just really followed the scope and sequence, and then everything's in there. Everything's in there, all the lessons, all the games, all the directions. It's really great. And it makes it so easy to use when you're a classroom teacher and you're already planning. I mean, I plan everything because I teach all the subjects. So that's one thing I really loved about this, is that it was so easy to implement. And it did not take, I mean, it takes time, obviously, to plan lessons, but it's not like I'm creating everything from scratch. And that's one of the things I really loved about it. I needed something that was really manageable and doable. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'm going to go on. Then it's day 2. So each skill is basically 2 days. And on day 2, I start out with kind of just reviewing steps 1 to 3 real quick, a quick review. We arm spell and write some of the words from the previous day. I'm monitoring, giving feedback as needed, and kind of going through that part pretty quickly, a quick review like we do every day. The review is really important to always just spiral back, just helping the kids remember what they've learned. And then step 4 on the lesson plan sheet, I kind of go 4, and then puzzle words is number 6 on the sheet. I actually do that first on the second day. So a puzzle word is a word where part of the word is not phonetic, and so that needs to be explicitly taught. And the reason that's important is because those those puzzle words will show up in some of those sentences that we're going to be using on the second day. On the second day, this is when I'll give the students the lesson plan page, and I'll have them mark the skill and read the sentences or phrases on the lesson page, and then we'll read them individually, partners, whole group. And then at this time, I'm sitting with the students or pairs of students, and I'm hearing them read. I might ask them questions about the sentences and maybe vocabulary, offer support as needed. And then I'll do sentence dictation. So I'm going to show you what that would look like. So this is when I would give them the lesson plan page. This is the one from the previous day. But now today at the bottom, you can see these are where the phrases and the sentences are, and there's usually something else on the page that you could do. I don't have a lot of time to do that. On the second day, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I really stick to these phrases and sentences. And so I would tell the kids, and I would model this on my easel, and I would clip it to the easel, and I would say, okay, you're going to take your highlighter and you're going to do this. You're going to highlight the skill like that moth, this bug, bad path. You know, going through the phrases or the sentences, brush that white moth onto the cloth. And they just take time with their highlighter and they go through this and they're marking the skills and they're reading. If they're done, they'll read them with a partner. I'm reading them with the kids, listening to them. And then I'll ask some questions to bring in that language piece again, like we talked about earlier, like this one, brush that white moth onto the cloth. I might say, do you know why you need to brush the white moth off the cloth? Do you know why that's important? And we'll talk about it. Or this whisk comes up again. Have you ever used a whisk? Do you know they come in different sizes? And you kind of bring in the language piece along with, you know, the decoding piece. So we do that. And then once kids have marked all the sentences, once we've read them, once we've, you know, talked about them, then I will choose, I'll say, okay, turn your paper over, and they'll use their whiteboards, and I will pick a couple sentences or phrases or both to dictate. And so if it's this one, I would say, and the kids have to listen first with no writing, and I would say, brush that white moth onto the cloth. And then the students have to say it back to me, and then I can repeat it. And once they've said it back to me accurately, then they can start writing. And then I can say this whole sentence as often as I want to. I can just keep repeating, brush that white moth onto the cloth, and then they are engaging in sentence dictation and they're writing it down. And then one of the things I started doing, because some of my students were just going way too fast and they weren't double checking and proofreading. So I just went online and I made these for the kids. And I give these when we're doing sentence dictation. And then we talk about capitalization. Does your sentence make sense? Do you have the right amount of words and in the correct order? Do you have the punctuation? And do you have the spelling correctly? One thing about the sentences is they're cumulative. So everything in the sentences, the students have been taught. And so I would expect that things are spelled correctly. And if not, then that's a time when there's some corrective feedback so we can get that spelling accurate on their board. And so sometimes all it takes is I might point and be like, oh yeah, I have to or I might even just say, I think something might be missing. And if they look at it, they can usually find like a capital is missing or a punctuation. Sometimes I'll restate the sentence if they have a word missing or in the incorrect order. If it's a spelling mistake, I might say, let's arm spell that. Or I might ask like, well, what sound do you hear first? And go back to, you know, just some of those probing questions to see if they can fix the spelling on their own. I would rarely ever just tell them the spelling. It's usually through a probing question. On the lesson plan sheet, you saw this where if you had time, the kids could draw a line and make compound words. I've also seen where you could put these words on index cards and the kids can match them and play a little matching game. There's ways you can practice your sounds. There's lists of words that are very close, but maybe just missing, or a vowel is different or a letter is different. So the kids really have to be tuned into the pronunciation. There's lots of different things. They're going from mad to made, pan to pain. It just depends how much time you have. These are really good, I found, for review. So I didn't always have time to do all the extra things on day 1 or 2, but sometimes they were really nice to do on a review day. I wanted to show you the flip cards because that's something I never really thought about before or never made before, but with my training, I learned about these flip cards and the kids really like these as a review. So going from the closed syllable with the CDC word and then adding the E on the end, the kids have learned prior to this, and you have in the downloads the vowel consonant, I think A consonant E is the page that I gave you, where it goes bad, fade. Pale. And you can have the kids make the cards. I don't in the small group because I just don't have that kind of time. But you could, if you want to have the kids make them, you can have the kids mark them. The kids have learned like, oh, E can jump over one consonant to make that vowel say its name. It says the long A. So the students have already learned that. So the flip cards are nice to bring out in those lessons, but also just as a review, especially if you're noticing in the dictation, kids are spelling words wrong or they're forgetting. These are really great to bring out as a review. And then it's the end of day 2. And we always end with a game again. And so the second day I usually play bingo or tic-tac-toe, and then I put cut up sentences in my games rotation. Cut up sentences are a really great way to work on that syntax and repeated reading, comprehension, but I was having a hard time getting to it. So I started adding that to my games rotation, and I do it 2 different ways. So the first way is to take one sentence, like in this picture, and cut each word out individually. And I just put them in little Dixie cups, and I would hand one to the students. A lot of times they were working with a partner. They really like to do that. Then it seems more like a game. It's more fun. And then they have to, they know, okay, the capital letter that goes first, and then there's the end mark that goes last. And then they have to take the words and they have to get those in the correct order. So we really worked on the syntax. It doesn't make sense. Then they would have to write it out. They would mark the skill. They would read it, and then they might trade it in. So they're done with that one. They might do 2 or 3 in one game session, about 10 minutes. And then the other way to do the cut up sentences is to take the whole group of sentences at the bottom of the lesson sheet and then cut them in half. And then the students would have to match the halves. And so this was interesting because there's a lot more pieces. So this was one whole group of sentences, but they actually did a really good job. And they found the capital letter, and then they found the end mark. So they kind of knew what goes first or second. And then they just started matching, what works, what makes sense. And if it was a question word, the kids, it was interesting. They said, well, it's a question, so it has to start with one of these kind of words. And it really made them think about, what would make sense. And then the same thing, if they were done, I would say, okay, dictate one to your partner, or pick 1 or 2 to write down and mark the skill. And during this time, I'm doing, similar, sitting with the students, seeing what they're doing, listening, asking questions. They can use the cups card again, and I'm just offering support as needed. And so that's pretty much the end of day 2 of the same lesson. We clean everything up, and then we just get on with our day. I didn't typically do a day 3 of the same lesson unless it was particularly challenging. I tried to keep the lessons moving, and just continually doing a review at the beginning of every lesson is really important, to just cycle back and just keep reviewing so the kids remember what they've learned. And then for homework, it really just was sending lesson pages home. I sent games home that the kids could practice. Some students have charts at home. I talked to the parents at conferences. I sent home information about the Brain Friendly Reading YouTube channel, which is really great if parents were interested. And so the homework piece, the kids took things home, and then the parents knew it was coming home. So I just sort of left it up to parents' discretion, how much they, played the games at home. And I know some kids did, and some kids maybe not as much. Like I said at the beginning, the whole group is how this began. At the end of September, all of October, and the beginning of November, it was all whole group. And that continued all year. Every day chart tapping, every day arm spelling as part of our word power block with my district curriculum. And then some skills were integrated into word power block where they fit with my district curriculum. So like, for example, this slide right here, this is a slide from my district reading program word power, and it was a compound word lesson. So what I did is I just did a little extension and I turned it into syllable types. And so the kids, we talked about different syllable types, throughout the year. And I have this little pocket chart. This is clipped to the back of my easel that I use in my small group. And I have the different syllable types. I put these words on cards, and then the kids would decide, okay, what kind of syllable is that? Oh, this is a vowel consonant E syllable. The E can jump over one consonant to say its name. Or, oh, this is R controlled. And then they would put them in the syllable chart. We used whiteboards, markers. I rarely printed off lesson pages for my whole group. It's a lot of paper. And I found that it was just really successful just having, my whiteboard, my easel. And then I would take some of the spelling lessons specifically if they kind of lined up with my word power, and I made little slides out of them. So this is the vowel on this side, vowel consonant E with the suffix. And I made this slide with the morphology boxes. We put the base word in, we'd put the different suffixes in, and then we would talk about how the spelling changes. And spelling is a big part with brain friendly reading. The spelling is huge, and the kids learn so much about spelling. They have their spelling inventory, just that they grew so much. And then we would talk about, how this changes spelling, how it changes the tense, how it can change the part of speech. And they learn, floss rule, and then these different 1-1-1 doubling rule, changing Y to I, when you use CH, TCH, when you use CK versus K, and you can see this, we did everything pretty much on whiteboards. So for my data, I was really encouraged in January. So this is from January, and I left it in just to show that I was really, really happy with where the kids came from and where they got to by the end of January. So for me, just learning the program and trying to implement it, my whole group pretty much grew. Everyone grew in accuracy, 5 out of 6 in rate, and even my whole class was making progress, even though not every student is in a differentiation group. But because I do 2 of the key skills, whole group, arm tapping, arm spelling, and chart tapping, everybody is getting 2 of the big pieces of the program. And so all the kids seem to be progressing. And then, like I said earlier, the differentiated reading group that my paraprofessional leads, we did not see the growth that we saw with the brain friendly reading group. So we switched her group to brain friendly reading at the end of January. And then one of my students in particular, this is interesting to me, that and why spelling is so important. He read beautifully on his NWEA Map assessment. His DRA was totally fine, but when I gave the spelling screener, it was shocking, and it was very unexpected what his spelling looked like. So I pulled him into my group, and he grew a lot in this school year by working on all of these brain-friendly reading strategies. And then this is also from fall to winter, just my group showing the growth. So I was really encouraged. I just kept it going, and then decided, okay, the paraprofessional, she was really, really into this. She loved it, and she wanted to do brain-friendly reading, and so she started as well. And then by the end of the school year, so this is NWEA by May, so 91% of the whole class improved in rate, so you can see each student, and then 87% of the whole class improved or stayed the same in accuracy. So we had some good growth, whole group. I was really, really happy. And then this is my differentiated reading group, 100% improved in rate, 6 out of 7, same or improved in accuracy, where you can see the fall and spring rate, and then the orange fall accuracy, and then the blue spring accuracy. So we had some really big jumps, and it was obvious with the kids in their classwork. And when I listened to the kids read, like in our whole group reading, I could just see the difference. And then this is the paraprofessionals group that started in January. That group really soared too once we started using brain-friendly reading. This student in particular, student C, she didn't even have a score in the fall because she had so many errors, and she did not make it past foundational skills. And then by spring, I mean, her data, it was just unbelievable, like with her reading, but also with her writing and spelling. It was just huge growth, and it was just obvious to look at. So that's pretty exciting. And then the Words Their Way spelling inventory is the first time I've ever done it. I have never done it before. I've heard of it, but I really didn't know much about it. And I learned about it in my training, and I talked to my interventionist about it, and found it online. It's free. And so I gave this 3 times. So you can see in November is the light blue, then in April is the dark blue. And then 2 months later, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to give it again. It's only been 2 months. I'm not sure. And then I gave it again, and I could not believe how much the kids even grew in just 2 months, just by doing this program consistently, daily. It was just great. So 91% of the class within grade level spelling. Even my student whose spelling was so so low at the beginning of the year. He's the reason I, brought him into my group, because his reading, he sounded good. Even he grew too, all the way over to here where he was down in this, foundational level. So it's really exciting. And then my small group with their spelling in the oranges in June. And then just one last graph, the sounds correct are on the top and then the words correct are on the bottom. So they were hearing more sounds and getting sounds correct. But then also they were actually getting whole words correct too, and increased in that as well. So the one thing I really liked about it is I could really see they were learning skills. These are not words the kids memorized. I never gave them back their spelling inventory. It was for me. I kept it, I graded it, I filed it. I would give the next one, I would compare it, and they never saw it. This was for me to see how they were doing. So they didn't know what words were on there. They didn't study them. And that was just really, really encouraging to see the growth just by learning the skills. And then I think brain friendly reading, it's just so accessible. It's such a great program. You can do it with ordinary, affordable materials, which is something else I loved about it and what I was looking for. It gave me a chance to learn the program, and the way the training was set up, I could start implementing it immediately with chart tapping and with arm spelling, two of the big features of brain friendly reading, which I thought was great. I didn't have to go through the whole program, to the end of November before I could start. I was encouraged, just start, just try it. And I'm really, really glad I did. I attend weekly coaching sessions. It comes as part of the training. So Monday nights, I go to the coaching sessions, pretty regularly during the school year to learn new lessons, to have refreshers, and then also to ask questions because things come up and I may not know the answer because I'm still learning all of this. So it really helps me grow my skills. And then I just kind of listed materials I use. So I want people to know you don't need fancy materials. Everything's repurposed. I use an old easel, an old pocket chart, and I've been teaching for 29 years. So like I said, I have a closets full of stuff. I just pulled stuff out I had. Duotang folders, whiteboards and markers are really big. And then highlighters and maybe colored pencils or regular pencils. And then math materials for the games like markers, dice. And then I store everything in plastic tubs or baskets from the dollar store. Really nothing fancy. File folders. So it works out really, really well. And then if you're interested, this is the training that I attended at the end of September. It's the level 1 Orton Gillingham based training. And it's found on the We Shall Read website. And it's discounted right now for $125. This was a game changer for me. I am so glad that Brain Friendly Reading posted on that Science of Reading Facebook post that day last summer, because it really changed the way I teach reading, and I just learned so much. So I'm super thankful that they posted, and this is the training that I did. It's so worth it. So thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And if you have more questions, brainfriendlyreading.org, weshallread.org, awesome YouTube channel. YouTube.com, Brain Friendly Reading, so many videos. It's super helpful. How to tap the chart. There's just so much on there. So I'd encourage you to look at that. It's really great. And then they're active on Facebook and Instagram, at Brain Friendly Reading, at We Shall Read. Really good posts too with ideas and things teachers are doing. So that's really helpful as well.
The chart that you showed, was that NWEA or BAS?
NWEA.
I did take the training 2 years ago, and I'll tell you, it really transformed my reading instruction. I'm Orton Gillingham trained, and I've used it as a special educator for 28 years. And I'll tell you, this training really streamlined my instruction. It's easy to use, it's structured, it's sequential, and the fact that you're integrating the reading and the spelling is just highly effective. I found students that I work with right now as a tutor, their spelling has improved so much because as they're reading these words, they are using those patterns to spell, random words. Well, not random. They have the pattern in them, but it's not a list that they memorize. They have to actually encode the words by arm spelling each sound. So very effective.
Yeah, I agree. The spelling really blew my mind. This is the first, I've been teaching a long time, and this is really the first year where I didn't have lots of kids always ask me, how do you spell this? How do you spell that? I would just say, if somebody asked, put it on your arm. What do you hear? Put it on your arm. And some kids just on their own, they would get their tap chart and maybe to look up a vowel team. So, and I would just say, get the sounds you hear in order, right? That's what we want them to do. And kids really started doing that. And I've never seen that before in 29 years of teaching. So the tapping the chart and the arm spelling were just huge in my whole class. And then the other part, playing the games for the repetition with my small group. Yeah. If the other presentation that Alex did on spelling, that was really good too. One of the presenters in the literacy series talked about how she's a second grade teacher, how she used decodables and used brain friendly reading then as her spelling curriculum. So that was really interesting. That's going to be posted. And then I want to use the phonics screener next year, or in September, I guess, this coming school year. And Elise did a training on that, and that one's really good too. That one's been edited and posted, and to show how she used the phonics screener in 4th grade to bring in some of those students and have those small groups, even in 4th grade, to fill in the gaps of what they're missing. So I'd like to do that next year to kind of get even more specific on, the skills that they might be missing. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do all that, but that would be a goal.
Yeah, just real quick, I think I just missed it. I would love to see that little flip card booklet that you showed. It looked like index cards, and maybe you just revealed a letter at a time. Do you have that right there that you could just pop it back up on the camera?
Yes. Yep. So they're just made out of, I just made them out of index cards. You could also use paper or Post-it notes, and then you just do strips and then put this part and then the E's on the opposite side when you fold it down.
Gotcha. Okay. That's great. It looked simple enough, but I wasn't sure if I was missing something. Okay, great. And I don't think that's in the training guide, is it? Is that something you just came up with?
That's something I learned in the training. I've never heard of flip cards. I've never used these before. I learned these one day in the training. Kristen, the founder of Brain Friendly Reading, showed us. And so then I made some of them for different skills. And then these are really nice for review too. So I use these during the lesson on vowel, consonant, E, but then also just bringing them out as a review. And you can use them for different skills too, like open syllable, closed syllable, or lots of things. But this is the one that I brought out to show, and it matches the lesson page in the downloads. So that page is right here. And at the bottom, you can see, like, you could just practice it this way too. You don't have to have the flip cards, but the flip cards are just kind of fun. So I just took these words and turned them into the flip cards.
Christy said, I think the training guide is digital now for people who do the 30-hour training. Okay, so it might be digital now, a digital download, but you'll find all the materials right there, which is great.
I would recommend, I love the digital copy. So I received the bound copy, which I like too, because I take notes in this. And, I'll make copies, but it's easier at school to make copies with the digital download because I can send them to the copy machine. So I use this for notes, and, like at Monday night coaching calls that I go to and with Erin during the school year. I went to a lot of them, and she did like a 10-minute review at the beginning of different skills, and I would just like take notes in here. And then the digital copies on my computer, and then I would use that to, you know, print out the pages I wanted, and it was just faster to just send it to the copy machine. So that's what I did. And I bought I had to buy the digital download, but I think I bought it over Thanksgiving when it was like Black Friday deal or something, and I got it half off. But I think having both is really nice. Thank you, everybody, for coming on the holiday weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Julie, for the wonderful presentation on how you incorporated brain-friendly reading into your classroom and did so with such ease and with wonderful results. Your presentation was so thorough. So thank you for sharing that. And if all of you enjoyed the presentation, you can please leave us a positive review on the We Shall Read Facebook page. And also, if you missed any of the We Shall Read Literacy Series presentations, you can go to weshallread.org, and under the trainings tab, or there's a tab in the corner, the menu under trainings, you can find recordings to any of those presentations that you missed.